In this video, I'm going to break down a real life example of horrible sport parenting that I stumbled upon last night. All right, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, welcome in to you as well. If you're a regular viewer of mine and you are looking forward to another episode of my Performing Under Pressure series, no worries. We're going to be getting back to that next week. If you haven't seen episodes 1 or 2, I'll make sure that I get those linked in the description below. So after this video, if you haven't seen them, make sure you check them out. We are taking a break from our regularly scheduled programming because of a conversation and really a series of Facebook posts that I came across last night. And I'll be honest, it's a little sad how unsurprising seeing these posts was for me because I've seen it so many times before, but I will absolutely allow you to have your own reaction. All right, for the sake of context, it's 3 posts written by the same sport parent who also coaches, and the posts were written in a youth football Facebook group. Here's the first one. Okay, let's put this to rest once and for all. Some coaches think you can lose and still develop. What are you developing? You're not developing winners if you're losing, so what are you developing? That post was followed up by, I think a lot of y'all are missing it. Even if you're developing winners in life, not on the field, how is teaching them that winning doesn't matter helping that development? I'm serious and really trying to understand this mindset. So at this point, obviously, you can imagine there's been quite a heated debate in this Facebook group. There was many instances of parents and other coaches just being in complete and utter disbelief, but it wasn't done. There is, in fact, one more post, and here it is. Hey, real talk, I respect some of y'all, but I ain't ever teaching my kids how to be good losers. I'm just not with that. Guess I'm built different. I'm teaching mine that if you lose, there better be hell to pay for somebody. All right, so before we break down the many ways that parenting philosophy and the underlying mindset that's clearly going into that parenting philosophy is flawed, I do want to make a couple points. The first is that this video is not meant to be a personal attack on anyone. As you could see, I made sure that the author of those posts, that their name was unreadable. So this isn't meant to personally insult or personally attack any one person. The second is that I've met many parents who were doing things or going about their parenting style that, while it was really remarkably unproductive and unhelpful for their athlete, they were doing so with the best intentions at heart. Almost always those intentions in one way, shape, or form were really just meant to keep the child safe. Parents are hardwired to do this. So when I read posts like this or I meet parents like this, I always come into that conversation with the understanding that in the parent's mind, they're simply doing the best that they can in their head to be able to keep the child safe. For example, in the series of posts that we just saw, those posts tell me that this specific sport parent has, throughout their life, had a really hard time with losing or dealing with situations where they weren't able to get the result that they were seeking, and now it's become clearly a real trigger for them. In fact, in one of the posts that I didn't read that he also submitted to this Facebook group, he talked about how his mom knew that if he lost, that he wasn't somebody to come near. So it's very clear that throughout this parent's life, losing has created a very painful experience for them. And so in their mind, they're going to do everything in their power to make sure that their child doesn't experience that same pain. And so losing has become unacceptable. So again, this video is not meant to be a personal attack on anyone, certainly not this sport parent, because in my mind, they're just doing exactly what they believe is going to keep their child safe. Even though, ironically enough, this philosophy and this mindset is really only going to set that child up to, ironically, fail. More on that later in the video. This video is, however, an attack on that parenting philosophy, and it's also an attack on the underlying mindset that's in no way, shape, or form backed up by anything in psychology, anything in childhood development research, and it's not even backed up by any sort of logic whatsoever. Before we break down all that, I do have a free gift for you today for stopping by the channel. If you have an athlete or a performer or you are an athlete or a performer, I want you to get over to trainwithperk.com/free guide. That free guide contains 3 easy to install steps. It's about a 10-minute read, but those 3 steps are absolutely going to help any athlete or performer better mentally prepare for their next big moment. Get over again, it's trainwithperk.com/free guide. All right, so where on earth to begin with all this nonsense? Let's start with the lowest hanging fruit. And the lowest hanging fruit, the easiest problem to solve here with this mindset is this belief that this parent has that the only way an athlete develops is if they win. I'm gonna keep this very simple because I know 90% of you watching this understand just how absurd that is. But I do see at times this mindset or mindset that parents have similar to this that lead them to think that their child needs to be on the best team or that their child needs to play 60 to 80 games a year, or even, yes, if their child's team doesn't win, then somehow they're not developing. I've touched on this before on my channel, but let's go over it again real quick, what it actually looks like for an athlete to develop. There are 4 areas, yes, just 4 areas that an athlete must develop and invest time in improving in order to actually get better as an athlete. It doesn't matter if you're one of my professional clients or one of my youth clients. These are the 4 areas that any athlete must develop in order to truly become a complete athlete. They are physical development, technical development, tactical development, and yes, of course, mental development. So running through all of these, in order to develop as an athlete, you need to be physically getting bigger, faster, stronger, more explosive, etc. Technically, athletes need to be developing the individual techniques and muscle movements that they're going to need to be able to execute in competition. And they need to do this enough so that when the time to compete comes, they can execute these motor programs without much thought. Tactically, they need to be increasing their overall understanding of the game, the strategies to employ, and the adjustments that they need to be able to recognize to make whenever their opponent counters their strategy. Mentally, they need to learn to better handle the stress and the pressure and the adversity that their sport is inevitably going to throw at them. So when it comes time to compete, they can get the most out of the 3 other areas that we've just identified. That's my job when it comes to working with my clients. Maybe 1% of everything that I just laid out there for you has anything to do with whether or not the athlete wins the game. Because there is next to no correlation between the number of wins that an athlete has and how much athletic development they've been able to achieve during that contest. This is why it's so absurd that parents drag their kids all over the country playing in as many games and tournaments and showcases that they can. And honestly, it doesn't matter. The professional athletes that I work with day in and day out, that the teams that employ those professional athletes care at all about what that athlete's 13U sports season, what their record was. Do you think they care about what their record was in high school or even how well their college team did? Absolutely not. All that sport team cares about is whether or not this athlete has developed to a point where they can do the job that the team is requiring them to do. I'll say that again. They only care if you can get the job done. And the only way that any athlete, youth athlete, high school athlete, college athlete, can ensure that they're going to position themselves to do that job that these high-level teams require of them is if they actually develop as an athlete. All right, next let's talk about the ramifications that this type of parenting philosophy has on the child that it's being imposed on. Because this parent is essentially saying that the only way that this child can consider himself a success when he goes out and plays his sport is if his team wins. This group, like I said, is a youth football Facebook group. So odds are this specific child underneath this parent plays football. This means that this child has pretty much no control over whether or not his team wins the game. None. See, the thing about control, especially when we take a look at the results that these athletes are trying to get in their sport and their life, they don't have any control over it because there's just simply too many variables. For example, this young athlete plays football. which means there are 21 other athletes on the field, plus the coaches who are influencing the game, plus the referees who may or may not get calls right all the time. This poor child has no control over the outcome that his team is going to be able to get. The fact is, this child only has control over the decisions he makes and the actions that he takes that best position him to do his job, do it well, and that positions him to maybe have success on that day. However, with the parent that this child has, there's almost no scenario where the child can control what's in his control, go out there and do his best, and still be seen and be able to define himself as a success, or even be seen as a success in his dad's eyes. That is remarkably sad. Because here's what I would say to this parent, and you better believe I'm gonna post this video in this Facebook group. Here's what I would say to that parent. I would say tomorrow, you need to go out and win. And the only way that you can define yourself as a winner tomorrow is if tomorrow in your job, you get a promotion. And if you come home that night without a promotion, there's going to be, I believe it was hell to pay. That hell to pay is going to be, let's see here, what's something that adults hate to do? Taxes. That hell to pay is going to be every single time this sport parent comes home. If he didn't get a promotion, then he has to go line by line through his taxes. That would be the scenario that I'd create for him. And some of you watching this are probably laughing as I say this and as I spell this out, because you know that it's absurd. Because of course, it's not at all in this parent's control if he is able to go out and secure a promotion. The best that he could do would be to control what's in his control, best position himself to get that promotion, and even then, he might not get it. But in this house, in the house that he's created for his athlete, that makes him a loser. And we don't lose in this house, do we? Let's be very clear. There are some very serious sport ramifications for a young athlete raised underneath this parenting style. Because the truth is that college athletes, their teams lose. Professional athletes lose. The Olympians that we're watching on TV, they lose too. USA Women, they just lost the other day to Sweden. And no, in spite of one of his posts, it's not about teaching young people that it's okay to lose, but it is about teaching a young person how to define what success actually is. You can call me soft, you can call me fluffy, and you probably will. But I've been in the business of working with the mental development of developing and high-level athletes for almost a decade now. You cannot teach a young person that losing is unacceptable, or that if they lose, now all of a sudden they're worth less to the world or to the people that care about them. We could do a whole other video on the lifetime ramifications that type of mindset would have on this poor child. You need to teach them how to lose, because we all lose. And it's a critical part of the process. And it's arguably a more important part of a young athlete's ability to mentally develop in their sport if they learn how to lose, they learn how to learn from that loss, they learn how to make adjustments for next time, and they learn how to come back at it just as strong as they did before the loss in their next competition. If you want to learn more, get over to trainwithperk.com. I've got plenty of free resources over there, and obviously plenty more to come on this YouTube channel.